Well, to go back to how love and friendship fits into that. Let me begin by this part of the topic by reading a bit of Hamlet's view about friendship in this play. We can't say with any certainty that this is the way Shakespeare felt about it, but it's such a strong indication. It comes up particularly when Hamlet is about to put on the play within the play for Claudius and Gertrude, and the players have just arrived in Encinore Castle. He knows them, they're old friends. He recognizes the chief player, and he knows the boy actor who's with the company, and so on. He jokes to the boy actor, but is your voice changing? And you're taller than when I saw you last, and so on. Clearly very familiar with them. In fact, it's clear that Hamlet loves theater. And now this is his opportunity to test Claudius by putting on a play that will somewhat resemble the situation of his father's murder. If you remember, he complicates that in a nice way by suggesting to the player king that as they're preparing to do this, is you could, for a need, study a passage, some 16 or a dozen or 16 lines that I would set down for you to memorize and put in your player actor king. So of course we'll do that, that's our business. And presumably they do so. Now, one of the great puzzles in studying Hamlet, thinking about that, is what portion of the presentation, the play within the play, is what Hamlet wrote on that occasion. We'll come back to that in a moment. But at the moment, what I want to talk about is the conversation he has with Horatio. Horatio, of course, has been there since the start of the play. He comes on in the fourth scene, it comes on in the first scene, excuse me, to be with the members of the guard. And they invite him because he's a gentleman and he speaks Latin, and therefore he can talk to a ghost. And he attempts to do so, but the ghost evades him. Horatio sees the point that he's being urged to bring Hamlet, and that happens by the fourth scene of the play. Hamlet comes along too in this very cold night on the battlements of the castle, and the ghost does appear. Horatio, in the meanwhile, there's been a very interesting colloquy between the two of them about the whole issue of faith and skepticism. It's an interesting answer to the question, why does Shakespeare bring in Horatio in such an important role? It's not in Shakespeare's sources that Horatio is entirely an invented character. From the very start, he's a skeptic. He comes on, the people on watch have seen this ghost 2 or 3 nights now, and they've brought him along because they want to have him talk to the ghost and so on, also to verify their experiment, which they don't know what to make of this. They're terribly afraid about the whole situation. And his response is to say, tush, tush, 'twill not appear. This isn't going to happen, you've made this up, and so on. Then, of course, the ghost does appear. And his response to that is to say, I would not this have believed without the sensible avouch of mine own eyes. Wonderful line, isn't it? So he comes across as almost a kind of a scientist, an inductive, a person who wants evidence. He wants to see things and be able to touch things. And in back of that, by the way, I think is the story from the New Testament about doubting Thomas. After the resurrection, Christ comes back and his disciples, and one of them, Thomas, asks if he can touch Christ's wounds. And Christ says, yes, of course you may do that. And then he says, in effect, that's fine, wonderful that you want to do that, but blessed are those who do not see and yet believe, and defines belief as belief in the impossible and the unseen. So that right from the start, the play is crossing that interesting balance between faith and reasonable investigation. And it's very useful, I think, in the course of the play to have Horatio fill this role of the skeptic, because this is the skeptic who's then convinced, well, if I've seen a ghost, I guess I have to say I saw a ghost. But even there, he and Hamlet are concerned about various other possibilities. The ghost could be a spirit, a devil, who is coming in that guise to tempt Hamlet to some sort of dangerous extension of himself. So they still have to test the thing out. And that's one of the reasons, of course, having the play within the play. In the course of all that discussion between Hamlet and Horatio, when, again, Horatio's been expressing his a doubt, although agreeing he really did see the ghost, Hamlet says, Horatio, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And your philosophy is a wonderful phrase. It means not just you, but you people. And whole philosophy here means natural scientists as well as anybody who's studying the natural world. You natural science people, and so on. You want to test every piece of evidence and so on. Let me tell you that there are more things in heaven and earth than they're dreamt of in your philosophy. So that's very nice. We surmise from this that Hamlet and Horatio have, we're told that they have had wonderful discussions at Wittenberg with their students together, so actually sort of graduate students, I guess. They're not enrolled in any course so far as we know. After all, this is the Prince of Denmark, but they are both studying there at Wittenberg, famous name, of course, isn't it? It's connected with the beginning of the Reformation in Europe, and there they have obviously been talking late in the night with each other. It's a wonderful kind of friendship where they trust and love each other, but they enjoy the difference. They enjoy trying to persuade each other. They learn from each other. They're open to suggestion, but they're also holding on to their position and so on. Hamlet very strongly, from the beginning, taking the view that Horatio, it's wonderful to have somebody who's a skeptic like that, but he has something to learn on the other side of this issue. Now that comes up in Act 3, Scene 2, as they're about to put on the play within the play before Claudius and Gertrude in the court. Hamlet has talked to the players as they're getting ready to go about it. Learn how to do this properly. Don't wave your hands around in the air. Don't overact and so on. It's a wonderful little discussion from Hamlet's point of view of how to be a good actor, and also what drama is. And he says about that score, he says that this is the purpose of playing was and is to hold the mirror up to nature, to show virtue his feature, score in her own image, and the very age and body of the time his form and pressure. It's basically sort of Aristotelian, although I think, in fact, Shakespeare doesn't seem to have learned that from reading Aristotle. There's no evidence that he did. He knew the name. He mentions it a couple of times. Only twice in the whole corpus does the name of Aristotle come up. But this was in the air, that idea of drama as mimesis, and showing us a picture of ourselves in this heightened sense that is so important to our sense of who we are and to our culture. So that's the reason he wants to have these actors do a thing well and not overact. And beneath of this, too, is the notion that a really good play can do a remarkable thing, which is to test the conscience of a person in the audience. That if Claudius is shown a representation, a mimesis, that's what a play does. It doesn't give you an exact picture, it's not a photograph, but it is something close enough in its resemblance that, and especially since other people don't know that Claudius has killed his brother and assumed the kingship this way, that he will give himself away. He will be so moved by that and so distressed that he will not be able to stand looking at that representation. Isn't that a lovely idealistic picture of the importance of drama? So parenthetically, I'm not sure I think that I know that that's true. I think there are a lot of people who go to see plays and remain remarkably unmoved about their crimes. True of Al Capone, for example. He loved going to opera, Pagliacci and so on. He'd sit there weeping buckets of tears, but it's not because they reminded him of his guiltiness. He just loved this Italian melodrama. But this is a very heightened view about drama, that it actually could help detect criminality. And what's more, they try this out, and that's what happens, right? They put on the play within the play. The king gets up and stalks out and so on, and Hamlet says to Horatio, I trust the ghost's word for £1,000. And they both agree that they have seen convincing evidence that he is guilty. Now that's very important. So Hamlet has relied on Horatio to help him determine the guilt of the king. He has told Horatio about what he's learned from his father about the murder, and he doesn't tell anybody else. So he has one friend on whom he relies with this obviously critical piece of information, because he wants to have Horatio's help in trying to sort this out. Now, why would he have chosen Horatio? And he speaks about that as the play is about to go on. This is what he says. In a kind of aside, just waiting for the play to start, he says, "What ho, Horatio, here, sweet lord, at your service. Horatio, thou art even as just a man as ever my conversation coped withal." Horatio says, "Oh, my dear lord, please don't embarrass me. Why? I've done nothing. Hamlet won't have that. He says, nay, do not think I flatter. For what advancement may I hope from thee, that no revenue hast but thy good spirits to feed and clothe thee? Why should the poor be flattered? No, let the candied tongue lick absurd pomp, and crook the pregnant hinges of the knee, where thrift may follow fawning. Dost thou hear? Since my dear soul was mistress of her choice, and could have not distinguished her election, she hath sealed thee for herself. For thou hast been as one in suffering all that suffers nothing, a man whose fortune's buffets and reward has taken with equal thanks. And blessed are those whose blood and judgment are so well committed that they are not a pipe for fortune's finger to sound what stop she please. Give me that man that is not passion's slave, and I will wear him in my heart's heart, I in my heart of heart, as I do thee. And then I think a little embarrassed by what he said, which is not saying, I love you, right? He says something too much of this. And they changed the topic. You go back saying, now the play's going to go on. I want you to watch. We'll get together and compare notes. But the rather lengthy pause on the idea of Hamlet's, he's had all this difficulty with Ophelia. She's returned us later. That's over. He's disgusted with his mother's behavior. It's distress about his father's having been murdered, of course, and he doesn't know what he's supposed to do about that. He's got Horatio. And it's interesting to see how it's defined. It's defined, first of all, in terms of disinterestedness. This is a problem, of course, anybody who belongs to a royal family or has a position of extraordinary wealth or in a corporation or wherever else. If you have a lot of money to dispense, a lot of power, it's very hard to sort out who are the people who are really coming at you for some purpose of their own, or whether the relationship is entirely disinterested. And Hamlet consents, and I think we have to see that in the play. There's every evidence that that's true. That Horatio, we don't know exactly what his social status is, but he's a gentleman, and he's not on a sort of ladder towards success at court. There have been fellow students in a way, and that, of course, makes an interesting comparison with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, doesn't it, where they apparently knew each other sort of in high school, as it were, back in the old days. And Hamlet quickly learns to distrust them. Not that they weren't great buddies and they have nice things to talk about and so on. And he really likes their company. At first, he longs for their company because he is feeling very lonely and nobody to talk to and so on. But he quickly worms out of them. At least it said in their behalf that they're not good liars. And he was able to determine, you were sent for, weren't you? And they say, yes, we were, we have to admit. And it goes on from there. So that just makes an important difference. He talks to them. Things are going okay for a while, but that makes, and of course we know with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern that they were brought in on circumstances that are not self-evidently criminal or corrupted, right? The king has summoned them and said, you've known Hamlet when he's a younger person. He's behaving very strangely. This is very upsetting. It's even a bit of a worry in terms of sort of security issues and so on. If you could talk to him and find out if there's something that's bothering him, come back and tell us, and that'll help enable us to know what to do about it. Now, that as a proposition is a very reasonable one, isn't it, don't you think? And they're loyal subjects. And one of the things that operates at this point is that Elizabethans believe very strongly, of course, that you should owe obedience to a monarch. They don't know, of course, that Claudius has killed his brother to reach the kingship.